Celtics Reddit podcast.
Back out to Smart. Fakes the pass all the time. Three. Bang!
Gets Williams screen. Lobs it up to Robert Williams.
Shouldn't he know? Jaylen Brown. What a thunder!
Tatum. Durant, the long reach. Tatum crossover, pull-up jumper. It's good. 50 points for Jason Tatum.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. We've got an awesome guest on this one, Matt Pennie, a regular contributor to the Athletics Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini. He played college ball at UMass between 2005 and 2008 and is currently the director of basketball operations at Three Step Sports. We asked Pennie what's going on with what is currently a pretty disappointing Celtics team. We also ask about his early career in sports and assess some very spicy draft prospects the Celtics should be looking at. Wayne Spooney is of course on the call as well, and without any further ado, here's Matt Pennie.
That's right, Ben. We have a very special guest today. One guy who is not only extremely knowledgeable about basketball, but also a huge Celtics fan, which means he's way overqualified to be on this podcast. It's Matt Pennie of the Game Theory podcast. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I appreciate you guys for having me. As you said, allude to, I'm Massachusetts born and raised, lifelong Celtics fan. My dad had season tickets from the day Larry Bird was drafted until the day they tore down the Garden. So I saw the last Celtics game there with the Orlando Magic. So deep roots with both the team and the area. So you guys asked me to come on. I'm elated. I'm happy to be here. It's great.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. Did he give up the season tickets after they tore down the old Garden? He was like, no, I'm not going into the Fleet Center or whatever.
The wrong direction. A Fleet Center, what is that? No, we went to a few games. He had row one balcony seats, which, if you remember the old Garden, it was like perfect. So it was behind one of the baskets. It was row one. It was a great view, an actual bird's eye view. The balcony at TD Garden, it's not bad for hockey, not as great for basketball. Just kind of goes straight up. That before it was kind of set up where you're on top of the court, and I think that's what kind of made the Garden so special. That and lack of air conditioning.
Yeah, right.
The Boston charm that we had for opposing teams and fans.
Yeah,
it's hot in here. Yeah, it's kind of our shtick.
And if we're on for long enough, Ben will be saying that about his attic because he's in Australia where it's currently summer, so gets a little bit of that Boston Garden charm from where he's podcasting from.
I can't get away from Australians. I have Sam Vecini and Game Theory in Australia. The recording times are always crazy. I have you here. This is a nice blending of both worlds, too.
Well, we can't be escaped. We're gradually bleeding into the Celtics and NBA basketball world. It's coming in hot.
Yeah, that dude on the Spurs last night who almost passed the game to us, which was very nice of him, is Australian, I believe. But
not a proud Australian moment, but I digress.
But nonetheless, so if you're listening to this podcast and you're not familiar with Matt, he is, like I said, on the Game Theory pod. His expertise, I would say, is college basketball and scouting and really the NBA draft. And you guys tend to focus your pod on the younger guys in the NBA, but you aren't like one of our normal guests in a lot of ways, right? We've had a lot of Celtics beat writers on whose entire job is covering the Celtics, and they've been doing that for quite a long time. So you actually have a unique path to basketball media, and like you said, while you're on before we started recording, while you're on an athletic podcast, you don't actually work full-time for the Athletic, right? So
I don't, no.
Yeah, so let's run through your background a little bit. I mean,
sure.
Probably the most important accolade you have is that you share an alma mater with me, and that is the University of Massachusetts. Yeah, absolutely.
The flagship.
And I refuse to say at Amherst, all right? You can say at
Oh my gosh, that's like my pet peeve. You don't say Indiana Bloomington. You don't say Notre Dame South Bend. When people say,
exactly.
Oh, I went to UMass. Which one? I'm like, stop. I didn't say Dartmouth. I didn't say Lowell. No disrespect. Boston. Great places. Friends went to all of them.
Yep.
Amherst. You don't have to say Amherst. But yes, beautiful place.
So if folks don't know, you actually walked onto the team. So how did you end up at UMass? Because I'm sure if you were good enough to walk on at UMass, you probably had offers from D2, D3 schools. Or so what was that decision like?
It was interesting. So I was a late bloomer. I played junior varsity basketball as a junior, a true junior on junior varsity.
Me too.
There you go. We're bonding here in real time. So I was about 6'3" at the time, just late to kind of figure it out. And by the time I was a senior, I was about 6'4.5", maybe closer to 6'5". And I didn't play AU basketball. I didn't play on the grassroots circuit. I missed half my senior year with an injury, or maybe 8 games or whatever. So I had some Division II and III interests, just because coaches would come see somebody else and be like, well, who's the tall, skinny kid who, is over there shooting threes and not playing defense? But that said, my high school coach had a relationship with the coach at Emerson, so I thought I wanted to get into sport broadcasting. Thought that would be a place that I could play at and also go to school at. And then late in the process, I said, I don't know if this is necessarily for me. I wanted to go to UMass. I wanted to major in sport management, which is an unbelievable program, top 5 in the country, and just kind of put the basketball dream aside. So I get to campus. I'm a freshman. And after about 3 months of eating Little Debbie snacks and Velveeta for consecutive days, said I can't do this anymore. I'm not this person. So I went to the basketball office and I volunteered to be a student manager for Steve Lapis and his staff. So for a year for them, I just helped with practice, whether that's cleaning up wet spots on the floor or doing laundry, filling up water bottles. And it was never a thing for me where I thought it was a job too meaningless or too small, because it gave me access to coaching. I thought maybe I want to coach, and I'm in this space. I'm developing great relationships. The end of that year, that staff gets fired, and Travis Ford comes in, who's this hot coach from Eastern Kentucky who played at Kentucky, and within a week of him being there, he named me head manager. So I didn't have any like delusions that I was going to walk on, and I didn't want to disrespect him for giving me this chance. And I thought it was really like I could be his right-hand guy, a liaison to him kind of on campus and coach down the line. But you have that itch, right? So like I was always playing, and I lived in Southwest, so I lived in Patterson. So when practice ended, I'd go to the dining hall, and then I'd go play at Boyden, which is the athletic center, or the Horseshoe in Southwest, until they turned the lights off, and just kind of stayed ready. I didn't think that I was going to miraculously get called up to do anything, but fate would have it. He wanted to have his own players, so he's literally running guys off the program, off the team. He brings in 6 transfers. I mean, do the math, he needed some bodies, and then by the time the summer rolled around, he's running camp, and I'm in really good shape. I've now grown to 6'7", which I could have used in high school to go somewhere else. So I was a 6'4" manager, and now I'm a 6'7" kid who can shoot it a little bit, warming up before they start going, and be like, he might be something. So I played some 5-on-5. I worked in some drills. The school year starts. I'm still head manager, and there's walk-on tryouts. I didn't want to even try out because I didn't want it to come off as disrespectful to him for what he'd afforded me the first couple months.
Right.
7 guys showed up. Not a math major, but I know you probably need one more to play fours. And that's when I just turned it on and hit some threes, dunked, talked some noise. And Coach Ford after sat me down with the managers and said, we don't want to lose him as a manager. I'm going to ask him to walk on, but if he screws up, he's back with you guys. And it went nuts. It was like a movie moment. Like, you did it. You made it. And I was fortunate enough to play. I walked on my junior year. So I played my junior year, my senior year. Then my senior year is winding down, and the coaches say, your clock, you actually have 5 years to play 4. You can come back and be a 5th year and be a grad student. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I get to do senior year again and come back and play at UMass. And it was one of the best years of my life. I was fortunate enough to be named captain. I met my wife the last month of school. We had 24 wins, 25 wins. We lost the NIT finals at Madison Square Garden. So I can say, hey, I played my last game at MSG. I think I played 2 games that year. But just an unbelievable opportunity and experience. And I am eternally grateful for all those who kind of helped me along the way.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, man. And you actually walked on to probably the best modern UMass team, or one of the best, what would become one of the best modern UMass teams. Like, there was several NBA guys. I think Gary Forbes played in the league for a little bit.
Yeah.
Lasme played in the league for a little bit. My favorite was Chris Lowe, the little lefty point guard.
Talked to him today. Yeah.
Oh, really? No shit.
Yeah,
that's
he's
awesome.
actually assistant coach at, I feel old. I mean, he's an assistant coach at St. Bonaventure now. And Ricky Harris is on staff at UMass. And like you said, Stefan was drafted by the Warriors. He played in the NBA. He was overseas for 10, 12 years. Had a great career over there. Rayshawn Freeman was 3-time all first team A10. He had a few tryouts here and there, but he just stopped playing overseas. Gary Ford's with the Nuggets. I think he played with the Raptors a little bit too. Jeff Vigiano, which you're older than me, one of my close friends. He played Italy for 12 years. We had a lot of guys. We'd never really quite put it together, and if we could defend the perimeter, it might be a different story. That's another podcast, another scar for another day. But we did have a lot of high-level guys, and I was, again, along for this ride where we played at Rupp Arena in Kentucky. We played at Freedom Hall in Louisville. We played twice at the Carrier Dome and beat Syracuse in the same season. So a lot of cool wins along this journey too.
Did you walk in and you were like, man, these dudes are so damn good? I mean, because you're a damn good basketball player in your own right. Lasme would have scared the hell out of me going against him every day.
You have to fake it till you make it. You can't. It's like I haven't been to prison yet, but it's like the first day in prison. You can't walk in intimidated. So I ended up getting up to, I think when I walked down I was 200 pounds, and I got up to 215 or 220 in the 2-3 years, just lifting and getting my butt kicked every day. But it comes with territory, right? You're a walk-on. Your job is to be on scout team, be on the big bump pad for hitting the post players down and getting them used to the rigors of the A10.
That's right.
But everyone, those guys end up all being very close friends who I'm still close with to this day. So they didn't try to kill me either, which was nice. And I had known them too from the year before as a manager. So it wasn't this crazy transition either. But I'm from a small town. The speed and physicality and the skill level, it's there's no adjustment. You just gotta kind of catch up a little bit. Right,
for sure. So after UMass, right, how did you stay involved in ball? How did that lead into what you're doing now? And, in the words of Office Space, what is it you say you do here? What are you doing now in basketball?
I'm also trying to figure that out. So when I was ending at UMass, Adam Ginsberg's assistant coach there was one of my mentors, still is to this day, and he actually kind of helped me walk on a little bit because he was at Northeastern. I went to a Northeastern team camp as a rising senior, had a good game. So we had a little bit of a connection. Sure. Not really, but he asked me, said, what do you want to do? I said, probably coach. So he picked up the phone and called John Carroll, who was at Northfield Mount Herman Prep School, and I went there. And I finished my master's degree at night at UMass, and the team at Northfield, we were top 5 in the country for 3 straight years. We had 20 Division I kids. And that's when I started to kind of cut my teeth in the recruiting world because you had all these coaches coming in, and I picked their brains for knowledge, and I was able to kind of see what I want to do and not do based on being there in the gym and do I want to do this at an elevated level. At the same time, I was coaching a grassroots team on the Adidas circuit, and I started working for Reebok in the summertime on their All-American camps. So I'm working at All-American camp, and I start in the product room just handing out jerseys, and 3 or 4 years later, I was ascended up to assistant director, and you're recruiting kids for those camps, and you're trying to figure out which guys kind of fell through the cracks because at the same time as Nike and Adidas events. And we were fortunate enough, again, to get guys that believed in us. We had Donovan Mitchell, we had Zach LaVine before those guys blew up. So I was able to kind of pull from all these places of playing and seeing every day what an NBA player looks like and playing against guys in league and non-conference. And now I'm at a prep school, and I have the Reebok thing at grassroots, and I'm able to see more of a progression of guys that a lot of scouts don't, just because I've been in the space at many different levels.
And look, another, I guess, more publicly facing or at least internet facing thing that you're a part of is the very awesome Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini. How did you and Sam, begin working together? How did you guys come together to be a part of, which is what is an awesome podcast?
Thank you. It's similar. It's people helping people. It was So when Reebok ended, I ended up going over with my boss to Under Armour, which I've helped run their events the last 6 years. And the pandemic was I don't know when it started. It's still going on, but let's say 2019. And
I think that's right.
I hope so. So it's March. I was actually watching UMass as they, I don't know if you remember or care, but they were warming up for the A10 tournament. They pulled them off the court. It's no, everyone's positive. So that moment, my job kind of paused for a year because when you run events, you can't have 200 team events and fans when no one can leave their house. So I was home. I was furloughed. I was on unemployment. My son was 1.5, and one of my roommates at UMass, Dan Cutler, had a relationship with Sam from just Adidas events and Adidas Nations and Sam going out there and said, hey, I think you should connect with this guy. I don't know where it leads. Maybe do some consulting stuff, maybe work on some scouting stuff together. And I kind of pushed it off for a few weeks because, not that I was down in the dumps, but like, what am I going to do with this guy who's at the Athletic and I'm at home watching my son all day? So we finally get on like a three-way call, and he's just picking my brain. We're just talking hoop. We're talking grassroots guys. And at Under Armour, we've had a lot of high-level guys come through that were top picks, like DeAndre Ayton and Markelle Fultz, and recently Jalen Suggs and Anthony Edwards. So we're talking about these guys, what I like, what I don't like, a little bit of their background story. Conversation ends, and it's winding down. He's like, hey, why don't we, do you want to record a podcast next week? I'm like, yeah, sure, sounds good. Love podcasts. So we hang up, and I call Dan. I'm like, what the hell did you get me into? Like, I don't know what a podcast is. I don't have a microphone. This guy's going to be like, gotcha, like Jim Rome. Like, well, what is that guy doing off the court? What are his vices? Like, says he smokes. It's like, I didn't know what I was walking into at all.
Sure.
So I was really nervous because I didn't, you hit record, you don't know what you're walking in, like what this thing's going to be.
Yeah, you don't have editing power, right? Yeah.
No, and when you have access to these kids at a young age, you also have their trust too. And I didn't want to disobey any trust I built up with their programs, their families, whatever. So you walk a fine line, and Sam was good. He threw me a couple fastballs, but I choked up on the bat and was ready for some of them. And we ended and said, all right, that's great. Do you want to do this again in 2 weeks? Like, I guess, like, I have nothing else going on. So 2 weeks later, we did another one and spaced it out a little bit. And now we're on kind of draft cycle number 3, which is kind of nuts when you think about it.
Yeah, amazing. Love a good podcast origin story. I want to shift now to the Celtics a little bit if we can.
Let's do it.
And at the end of really one of your recent Game Theory podcasts where you discuss the Celtics in depth, you ended it by saying, quote, it will get better. So my question is, will it actually? And how do you see it getting better, if at all? Internal development, deadline deals, is it going to be next off-season, or all of the above? Like, well, what's the pathway here? Because it keeps me up at night, if I'm being honest.
We should have recorded this yesterday before the Spurs game. And
I
I'm
know,
watching it. I'm rooting for Jaylen Brown to score at the end. I'm like, please let this be positive. He misses it. And I tweeted it to him. Like, this is fate. This is perfect. I think it's a little bit of everything. Like you said, I think it's internal improvement. I think it's some deadline deals. I think it's some next offseason stuff. We talk a lot about sample size on Game Theory. So when a guy's a shooter, say he takes 50 3-point shots, if he hits 26 of 50, we don't tout him as a shooter who shoots 52%. You need to see more. You need to see 250 shots, 300 shots. I still feel like that it's a little bit with the Celtics because you have all these guys in new roles. Brad Stevens is in a new role in the front office. Ime Udoka is in a new role as a head coach. And even Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are in these new leadership roles where you don't have the kind of security blanket of a Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker, who's the forward-facing kind of anchor star that gets the brunt of criticism, controversy, whatever it may be. So it's going to take a little bit of time. That said, I don't anticipate Celtics making any like really major moves. I heard Brad Stevens on the radio this morning kind of say, we'll make them if it's right for the team. We're not just going to do something crazy to do it. So I'd be disappointed if they did nothing. I know it's bad. It's a very tough watch, as you guys understand. A lot of my friends and family, my dad watches every game and texts me something wild afterwards, but I don't want to completely hit the panic button yet either. It's early. It's not good. I mean, we're in 10th place, but it's still early in the year.
Yeah, I made so you remember that little run where our defense looked awesome, and Brown was actually out. No, it was like 3
Feels
weeks.
like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I was like, if our defense is this good, we're winning 50 games, and then we went like 4-9.
Great. I have a bet with another media person, not me, just an actual media person who has more wins, the Wizards or the Celtics. I thought I was in the bag when the season started. I'm like, this might get a little tight down the stretch here.
I think so, but we might be all right. So let's take these up a little bit here. We are the Celtics Reddit podcast, right? So we went to Reddit. We farmed some questions. We said, what would you want to ask Scout Matt Pennie about the Boston Celtics? So first question here is about internal development. And speaking of 52% from 3, that, I believe, was Aaron Nesmith's sophomore year 3-point percentage
it
in
was.
college.
Yeah, 52 or 56. It was.
Yeah. So User Smart Celtics says Nesmith and Langford are the same age. Leaving aside contracts, who do you think is the better chance of being a rotation player? And why are they both not good at the thing they were going to be good at coming out of college? Like, Nesmith's trouble shooting, and Langford can't throw it in the ocean near the rim. And it should have been the opposite.
Yeah, that's a bear trap. The last part, I'll answer on that a little bit. I'm going to go with Aaron Nesmith. I am. I kind of want to frame a lot of this stuff in like the draft view lens too, because that's where I kind of analyze a lot of it. So I wasn't crazy high on Aaron Nesmith in the pre-draft process because, like you said, he was shooting otherworldly 50+%, but that sophomore year, and averaging I think like 23 points per game. He only played one conference game in the SEC. It was against Auburn. He played well, but then he went down with an injury. So all those stats, all those threes were against lower tier teams. And I'm always skeptical of that stuff because how does it translate? He had a good year the season before. I think he averaged 11 points per game. But it wasn't like the path that he was on. I don't think he could have necessarily kept that up either. That draft, I was more of a Sadiq Bey guy. I preferred him there, but I understood the move with Nesmith because he does have belief in his game and how he got there, and he played for an unsponsored grassroots team in the summertime, and he's hailed as like this worker, and his dad or his coach was saying he used to chop wood out back as like a warm-up, and he works out with Chris Middleton in the summer. Like I bought into all of that stuff. It just hasn't been all pieced together. Like I don't want to say he's still getting his sea legs under him because we're at the point now where we have to figure it out, but I don't want to write him off either. Like he could be a rotational guy making more of a contribution in those 15 minutes a night because the shot doesn't look bad. It like he's way better with his feet set, and I do feel part of this is not necessarily having a true point guard either that's making these really easy looks for him. Like he'll get open looks, but it's not like in the complete flow of the offense. Sometimes he catches it and it's like sort of a panic, like, well, if I don't shoot now, like I'm not shooting the next 6 possessions.
Yeah, right.
If you
or
have
touching the ball.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you have that in your head mentally, that's a hard hurdle for anybody to get over. And that's not a complete dismissal of why it doesn't work, but just as like a callback on a couple of games before he was out here, he had spurts against Philadelphia and Golden State where he went out and he had a dunk, he hit a corner 3, he makes a stop, and you get it. You get the appeal. He's more... He's better than a 24% shooter. I think that's kind of crazy. I'm lower on Romeo. I mean, he was a bad shooter in college. He shot 27% from 3. And there were scouts that said the reason that percentage is so low is he had a thumb or hand injury. It was more, he played through it. He's really tough. He's going to be a far better shooter. I saw him as like this good and not really great slasher of getting to the basket, had an even assist to turnover ratio. I did have questions about how his game impacted winning. That Indiana team was a really tough watch, if you remember. They lost 12 of 13 in one stretch. They had like 40 points in a game. And kind of pull the Celtics back in here. It was not a great draft in the range for him either. Like, I really like Tyler Hero. We've beaten that start to death that Danny Ainge wanted him, and he was swiped the pick before. Like, I like Brandon Clark, but you weren't going to reach that high. I like Keldon Johnson, but he wasn't a guy you were going to pick right there. The pick for Romeo at least felt at the time that you're taking a flyer on a top 10 guy out of high school that may have played through injuries, and now he's going to make it work, and he hasn't. So I'm not super high on those guys. I would say more Nesmith. I hope that wasn't a complete doomsday analysis. I don't know why they're not really shooting better or finishing by the rim. I don't know if it's a byproduct of knowing that the two Jays are getting 20 shots a night each, and you're just kind of running around out there and not focused mentally. But still more to be seen. They got to get some minutes too.
Yeah, so one thing I always think, like I kind of always preach when we're talking about the Celtics, is it's a special type of guy can touch the ball once every 5th possession and bury a 3. Like, if you're a role player, you got to feel the ball, man. You got to be able to take some dribbles every possession at least. And, like, Nesmith will go, like, I was kind of half joking, but he might go 4 possessions with literally out touching the ball. And then there's 4 seconds left on the shot clock. He's got a defender running at him. and he's got to fire up a three, and it hits the side of the backboard.
He's getting his cardio in up there. He's getting his down and backs. It was similar to that as a walk-on. I played 11 games in 3 years, so let's not act like I played all the time. But you get in, there's like 40 seconds left in the game. You catch it at half court, and people start yelling, "Shoot it! You touched it! Shoot!" I'm like, I'm not shooting. I'm from 43 feet away. Yeah, so I'm a little different than Aaron, but I understand the pressure you have externally to get some shots up too.
For sure.
Sure. Interesting. I guess shifting to the starting lineup now. So this is a question from Adam529 who asks, from a player development standpoint, Kyle Lowry developed late. And do you see similarities between Marcus Smart and Kyle Lowry in that sense? And can Smart develop to at least 85% of Lowry so everyone would stop yapping about the connector point guard the Celtics desperately need to trade half their roster for? Or is Marcus Smart truly what he is and can't become a championship starting point guard and therefore should be traded now? Kind of a long-winded question, getting to a lot there.
No,
but
it's good. I'm happy to yapper about the connecting point guard they're missing because that's
Please.
where I am too.
Great.
I like Marcus Smart. I do. I don't see that comparison really because, well, for Marcus, I think he brings you a real toughness and a real intensity to your lineup. Like if there's a scuffle, if it's going down, it's getting physical, I want that guy wearing the same jersey as me. It epitomized him, that Orlando game when Franz Wagner turned his back and he dove in for a steal and really changed the complexity, momentum of the game, I think is a better word. He's that type of guy. He's winning 50-50 balls. He's diving out of bounds. He's not Kyle Lowry, though. I mean, Kyle Lowry has the handle, the control, the tempo, the feel. He became this pick-and-roll maestro over his 6-time All-Star run in Toronto. I mean, they won a championship. He was Mr. Raptor. They said they're going to build a statue for him outside the arena. I don't know if we're doing that for Marcus, and I view Lowry more. They could. I don't know if it'll be in Boston, but Kyle's breakout was kind of more like opportunity and consistency. And then if you look at the numbers, Lowry danced around 40% from three for 5 seasons. Marcus Smart's highest was 18-19. It was 36%. Marcus about 5.5 assists. Lowry 7 or 8. I just view them as very different prospects, players, I guess a better way to put it. I don't want Marcus Smart as my point guard or primary creator. It's just he has it still in his head, that end of the game. It was like the end of the game with Spurs last night where he drives into like no man's land. Like that's a pass, a move, a cut. And I'm going to steal a line from J. Kyle Mann on The Ringer. And I told him today I was going to steal this. So he just talked about Jonathan Kuminga, and he had this line that was so crazy. He said, is he a chef or is he a patron? Are you eating the food or are you making the food that you eat? I said, that's wild, but makes like a lot of sense. Like, I don't know who the actual chef is for the Celtics. There's a lot of people that can sit at the table and eat, which is great, which is a skill. You need to eat the food, but I don't know who's cooking it. I wouldn't feel super confident necessarily if it's Marcus Smart.
Yeah, I feel like right now it has to be Tatum is kind of the cook, and that is been a learning process, I would say.
If he's the cook, though, it's like you need a few line chefs with him, right? It's like he can't he can't do it. Like 6 for 20, and he's coming off, and he said, admittedly, he was rusty. He's like, I'm not nervous, but I was a little anxious. It's like, okay, you were nervous. We can all get nervous. It's okay. That both the Jays, they take some stuff off to stay on the food analogies. They take their stuff off their plate. They had somebody creating a little bit more for them too.
Well, and you saw it, I mean, even in 1920, right? We saw that was the big breakout year for the Jays, and they had Kemba kind of helping them along, running pick and rolls for them. And probably more importantly was Gordon Hayward, who now I think has become criminally underrated for that team's success, man. The way he kind of connected those two guys and enabled them was just, I mean, it was just really a skill that does not show up in the box score that we have missed ever since he left.
Yeah, and I think that's why people go so crazy about it, because Gordon Hayward, I mean, he also evolved in real time after the injury because he wasn't the same type of player, and he made himself an integral part of that run when he came back. And he didn't have to come back. If you remember, like, he was hurt and he was kind of maybe 80%, but he did it. He willed it back, and he helped them a little bit in that run, even though it didn't always show up in the box score too.
For sure. So moving on to deadline deals here. So if we do target somebody at the deadline, right? There's all these normal names we see thrown out, Harrison Barnes, blah, 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 right? Those have been beat to death a million different ways, but we're going to ask you to, use your scouting expertise here, and we'll look for some kind of underutilized guys. So user can't handle the truth 34 says, what underutilized players from the past few drafts who need a second chance change of scenery could the Celtics target? And really, we got another very similar question from user Burner for Celtics. Seiko Doumbia, Jarrett Culver, Jalen Smith, Luka Samanic.
Yes, man.
These nailed it.
Close.
All right. These are the rookie extensions that weren't picked up. Are any of these guys going to be worth another shot?
I don't know. I mean, I was really high on Jarrett Culver out of Texas Tech. I was wrong there. I don't necessarily love the fit that he has with the Celtics. I prefer more of a shooter, floor spacer. He struggles shooting and can't really self-create, and that's why he hasn't seen significant playing time. Jalen Smith's been a really nice story. He's playing well in Phoenix, but he's kind of similar in that Robert Williams type mold, and I'm good with Time Lord. I like him a lot. I don't think that he's necessarily the issue. The problem I have with this, and it's a great question, is that there's no real like hiding in plain sight guys right now because of COVID. All these rookies and all these guys have gotten opportunity, and everybody's playing. I mean, I don't know if you saw today, like the Spurs have half their team in COVID protocol, so they signed Anthony Lamb. Like all those kind of fringy guys that were second round or unsigned. Like Gerald Green came off the Rockets bench today as an assistant coach, and he's going back to the G League as a player because there's opportunity there. Lance Stevenson had 30. Joe Johnson had a 10-day. Like my phone's on silent. I don't think it's going to ring right now. Somebody asked me today, how many people have to get sick for you to call out? I said there'd have to be like a bubonic plague and there's literally no one left and I could get a call. But the plain sight one's hard. I know the same names have kind of floated around. And this is not necessarily drafty type stuff, but I like Terrence Ross. I think that he could really help and give a little bit different feel. Somebody said maybe Justin Holiday, who's like the ultimate journeyman, but could he be a spark off the bench, give you a different look? I know Derek White's name is in a ton of trade talk for San Antonio, who wasn't great last night, but that's a guy that I try to piece together something for, because when you go back and dig in, the table setting for others while keeping the defenses honest with his shot. I mean, he had multiple assist games a few weeks ago, and then he has mixed with the scoring. Like that's the type of piece that I think the Celtics are missing. I don't necessarily think that he's the guy that puts them over the edge, but it's very buzzy right now. But there's definitely a lack of connectors in the Celtics. You see their offense, and there's not great ball movement. It's kind of one and done. One J gets one time, the next J gets one the next one. Jaylen Brown today said they have to screen a little bit better. I just think they have to move, pass, cut, and have some flow to it too.
There's a lot of talk about next offseason or the upcoming offseason, and I think it's a bit of a North Star for a lot of Celtics fans who have already sort of resigned to what this season is or it could be and is already looking forward to the next season. I've got another question here from user Waldy, who asks, does Pennie think the team should commit more to the young core, focusing on the development of the young guys, i.e. Rob, Romeo, Neesmith, Pritchard, and Grant, and possibly trading guys like Schroeder and Richardson, or should we prioritize adding veterans alongside the Jays?
My answer is veterans. I don't think it's really close. I think the core is okay, but you even see how short the bench is right now in terms of guys getting on the floor and making an impact. So it's this very weird thing and very weird talking point where with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on paper, you have these two great self-creating wing scorers who are 25 years old or younger. The NBA is a league that's built around finding players with this archetype, and the Celtics are lucky that they have two young ones, which is pretty insane because as much as I watch, evaluate, you try to get the draft right, the best people in the world get it wrong, and the Celtics nailed it twice. And you could even say they nailed it at the time with Marcus Smart. Has it all worked? No, it hasn't. But when you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, you build up the bench a little bit better. You reshuffle the deck, you add some scoring, you add some ball movement. And it's hard for us Celtics fans here, and it's hard for people in Boston or maybe Australia where you're used to success. You're used to the Patriots and Super Bowls, the Bruins and Stanley Cup, the Red Sox winning. This isn't good enough necessarily, but the frustrating thing for me is that you missed, and I talked to my buddy Zach about this today, you missed on 3 max contract guys for whatever reason. Chemistry, injury, bad fit in Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Kemba Walker, when it seemed so close. And it might have been. We might have been a fluke injury away of Gordon Hayward from really being an Eastern Conference favorite powerhouse. I mean, we talked about that. I remember when Gordon Hayward signed and he released that letter, like, unfinished business, my college coach going to the championship. Like, I still get goosebumps talking about that, because, like, that's the guy. Like, that's the piece. Like, he gets it. We got to pay him all the money, but, like, that's the piece. But then when you get down to brass tacks and you look, how did we pick up the pieces? When you trade Kemba, which I agree with, I think it was time for both parties, and then a number 1 pick for Al Horford, who you had before, but you didn't want to pay because Philadelphia was giving that extra year, which is a little nuts. But we're talking about the pieces that the Celtics need. That number 1 they traded was the 16th pick in the draft. We need shooting. That was a very deep draft. The next pick, a guy who hasn't played a ton, but I believe is going to develop, is Trey Murphy on Memphis, who went to UVA. Quentin Grimes was picked about 15 picks later by the Knicks. He's shooting 39% from 3. Even a scorer, a guy like I was very high on, Bones Highland. Now, I don't want to be a complete hindsight's 2020 guy. Like, those are the ones you should have picked. But if you need scoring and size, Trey Murphy is the guy. But instead, it turns into Alperen Şengün, who's traded. We don't touch it. The Celtics have to hit on role players in the draft. They have to. They have to get more wins. It can't be a write-off. So similar to the opening statement, I'm not hitting the panic button. I don't want to blow it up completely, but I don't want to sit still either.
Fair enough. That kind of segues into this next question. Whether or not it's worth asking, I'm not sure. There's a lot of chatter really among fans that there's maybe some incentive for the Celtics to tank this year. Where in the terms of acquisition through the draft, tanking obviously would put us in a good position to do just that. Do you agree that that's a legitimate way forward?
Very nuanced. So I think my answer to that for this draft class is no. If you asked me this a year ago, there was legitimate depth and star power at the top with Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs. And we've even seen guys exceed those early expectations in Scotty Barnes and Franz Wagner. Jonathan Kuminga went 7th, and I think he could develop for the Warriors. Even Josh Giddey seems like a Celtics type of player. Shout out Australia, where there you go. I didn't even know you're from Australia, and I already had that built into my notes. But like those type of guys, you get it. You tank for those type of players.
Right.
This class right now is not that deep of the elites at the top. They're mostly people right now on mock draft boards have some top 3 order of Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga, Jabari Smith from Auburn, and Paul Banchero from Duke. There's some fans of Jaden Ivey from Purdue, Ben Mathurin from Arizona. But if you tank and you miss in the lottery, it could be a disaster. Because like I alluded to, Franz Wagner went 8th. I love Franz Wagner. I think he's going to be a star in the league. That would be a hit. But I'm using friend Sam Vicini's mock draft here on The Athletic. The 8 to 10 range-ish, if we tank and you miss. Right now he has Patrick Baldwin Jr. Of UW-Milwaukee, Kendall Brown of Baylor, and A.J. Griffin of Duke. I think those guys are really nice pieces, but I don't think it's worth the mental and psychological warfare you're going to put on the remaining Celtics roster to get there. So say you blow it up and you trade Jaylen Brown. So Jason Tatum is going to have to go through this Paul Pierce-ish purgatory, just waiting around for a mega trade to get this thing back on track. It's not worth it for the players that are there on the other side if you miss. And the draft has also changed a little bit in that you don't get as many ping pong balls if you finish the worst record versus the 4th worst record. So it's literally a dice roll to do it, and I don't think that's the way that you're going to get this team back on track.
So it sounds like this year's draft is kind of like, I think it was Jaylen Brown's year with Dragon Bender up there, and Josh or was that Tatum's year? Josh Jackson, Dragon Bender.
I could look.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but whatever. I think it was Tatum. I think it was Tatum because people were saying we were going to take Josh Jackson, and then we were,
and he didn't want to come here.
Yeah, Ainge was flying out there, and they're okay. Well, they're taking Tatum, and thank God we did.
And I was. See, and part of this stuff is admitting you're wrong, right? I was wrong. I thought Markelle Fultz was the guy. He traded down.
Me too.
I'm punching walls. I'm like, great, Tatum, awesome. A Duke guy who's not going to pan out, and I'm happy to eat crow. I was totally wrong on that one.
I was devastated by the trade for the Fultz pick for Tatum. I think a lot of us were. So we've all eaten crow there.
That was legitimately shocking, man. Like
I was shocked.
Yeah. Has that happened ever where someone traded down from... I mean, the NFL, it happens all the time, but in the NBA...
What was Chris Webber? Yeah. That's I can remember that, yeah.
I mean, what was that, 30 years ago?
2?
Yeah.
2, 3, so somewhere around there.
30 years ago, yeah. Pretty wild. But all right, so kind of speaking... you mentioned Trey Murphy, which I love Trey Murphy. I would love Sengun. I think he'd be kind of a fun little piece on this team, too. Building through the draft, we've got another Reddit question here. User Toto Dad says, your podcast mate, Sam Vicini, mentioned in one of his recent pods how he believes that shooting is a skill that's not very hard to find, but I feel like Boston in recent years hasn't had a good track record with doing this. And he mentions a lot of guys like RJ Hunter that we drafted and kind of a collection of those type of guys that we've drafted and that just couldn't shoot. You know, they were billed as shooters and couldn't shoot. So this is a long way of asking whether you think there's a systematic problem within the organization to identify and develop role players, and you're seeing it kind of with Nesmith and Romeo, and less so, well, the opposite really with Grant Williams, to develop role players that can space the floor, and if so, how much of that should be attributed to scouting as opposed to player development? And more broadly, how difficult is it to project shooting in the NBA? Because it seems like that should be the one skill. Like, if this dude can shoot, he can shoot, right? But it's not really the case.
No. It's hard because the speed of the game is so different, too. I mean, I was looking today, just doing my little draft comps, and I looked up Obi Toppin's stats for when he was at Dayton, because he's like a 21% shooter now for the Knicks, and it's hard for him to get time on the floor. He was a 38 or 39% shooter from three, the college three at Dayton, and I thought he'd kind of be this like pick and roll spacing, not his forte. It's always going to be getting up and down and dunking and putting pressure on the defense there. It's difficult because it's definitely a mix of scouting versus what you have for player development staff, and the Celtics have changed over a lot of those guys, and the coaching staff is completely different. So I don't want to necessarily write off those guys yet either. I don't know necessarily why it doesn't always translate A to B. You would think it's easier to find guys, but I kind of disagree with Sam in a sense that it's easy to find guys on paper that may work, but I don't like Naismith's struggles. I don't think are due to lack of development. Like that guy's a worker in the gym, and I still believe that he will improve. I don't know if it's identifying different free agents. I don't know if it's guys that want to come in and like he says all the time that you can get shooting, but it's hard to necessarily like improve it all the time, and you don't know to what rate and what that looks like. And it's a lot easier to shoot in an empty gym at the Auerbach Center when nobody's there versus you're on the road at Madison Square Garden for the Knicks. Right. So I don't have a great answer for that. Unfortunately, I don't go to practices, so I can't really tell you the behind the scenes stuff. But it's not whiffs. But what really turns the knife is, again, the shooter you needed, we drafted. His name is Desmond Bane. He's on the Memphis Grizzlies. He is a superstar. He is a legitimate number 2 on a team that's going to be a wagon for years to come. So that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. My friends have told me I have to stop talking about him because that's the guy.
That's like the girl you were supposed to meet up with on Tinder, and your car got like a flat and something like, you know what I mean? You missed the date.
It's not a movie. It's not a movie. It's not like Hitch and, you know, somebody else. You went to the wrong apartment. Like, this is real life. Like, no, you have a flat. Like, you're not going there.
She just texts you like you're an asshole and never responds to you again.
You have no
right?
service, so the text doesn't go through back.
Let's do a complete 180 then, because we're getting close to wrapping up here. Pennie, we do occasionally we do these like fan therapy episodes where we just like all get together, largely unscripted, and just like talk it out to try and make ourselves and the fan base feel better about the current state of the Celtics. Right. So along those lines, let's talk some positives here. So I want to hear from you maybe some long-term things that the Celtics and their fans should be excited about going forward. We talked about the Jays, obviously, something to be very much excited about. What else might you throw on the pile there?
Man, if they won last night.
That's not a good start.
I'd say you're heading in the right direction. Despite losing last night, I thought the comeback against Orlando was like there was a little bit more fight at the end of games. So there's been a lot of games this season where I don't want to say they quit, but there's just a lack of focus, a lack of effort. I think those guys are going to turn the corner. They are. Jason Tatum, I mean, like Jaylen Brown was doing the one-man band thing here for a while, and he took 36 shots because someone had to shoot the ball. And I think some of his looks will be easier. And last night against the Spurs, he had some shots where it's almost like he forgot Tatum was there, and he was still doing the moves from like the games when he was out. Like he had a forced like 1 foot jumper, and he ran into 3 guys. So he'll get better. I think his looks will improve, and I think it's also something to get excited about that I don't think Brad Stevens is happy with this. I don't think Ime Udoka is happy with this. They're not going to roll over. They're going to either light a fire under guys or move guys, and that's the way as Celtics I'd argue we have to do it, because it's hard as like people talk about blowing it up, right? Let's tank, let's blow it up, let's get a free agent. It's hard to get free agents like marquee ones in Boston, and when we do, like we overpay, and you overpaid for Horford and it worked, but that's not a guy that necessarily now is going to be a person that changes the course of the season. So it'll get better as you make some tiny trades here, some veteran plays. You hope that the efficiency improves of Tatum and Brown. And stay positive. Robert Williams is a steal. That contract looks fantastic. Marcus Smart is still very good on a very good contract. If you keep him, if you move him, there's some assets behind that. Grant Williams shooting is great. What else do we have to say that's positive? What else could we go here? They're playing the Knicks tonight. I hope they win. Yeah.
Yeah, Neesmith and Grant will both be starting next year. Both will be shooting above 45% from three. Everything's going to be fine.
I can't say that.
I will. I have no accountability. I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, we've exhausted all options on this podcast. We've run through every potential promising scenario. None of them have come true, which is why we're asking essentially everyone who comes on. We're out of options.
Yeah, LeBron's going to finish his career here. It's going to be great.
I wouldn't even want that. I'm such an irrational hater. I wouldn't even want that.
You can hate, but I think it would help.
Until he puts a Celtics jersey on, and then I'm in 100%. But until that day. All right, so let's hop into some draft talk, your specialty. We've got a comment here, and several comments in the thread I posted on the subreddit from user I Hate Clutch Sports.
I saw that.
Which is
like good start.
He's one of our common contributors, one of my favorite usernames in the sub. So who are some players like in the shooter kind of wings or playmaker mold that the Celtics should be targeting in the draft, assuming, we're around that 500-y range like we were last season and are right now. So we're picking like 12 to 18. Like, who are some guys we should be keeping our eyes on? Like, ooh, that team's on. I'll watch him because Matt Pennie said we might draft this guy.
This guy stinks. I don't even work with the athletic guys. This is a hobby for me. It depends on what you want. It depends philosophically on how you're trying to build. The way I view it as, sometimes people in NBA teams, they're hesitant to draft older players. So Chris Duarte out of Oregon goes to the Pacers. He ended up going 13th, which I think is the right place. But he statistically probably should have won 6 or 7. But he's 23 years old. It's buyer beware, because on second contract you're 28, and then you're like, oh, I think we lost his prime. Celtics should go that way. So the first guy that I like is a senior from Kansas is Ochai Agbaji. He's 6'5", chiseled frame, two-way guy. He came back to school after flirting with the draft. He's averaging 20 points per game. He's shooting 52% from the field, 45% from three. Celtics fans. Can create his own looks. He finishes well in transition. He gets in the lane, converts above the rim, has been much more consistent across the board with what he does. And as that, he's okay. He's now elevated to being a star with Kansas, but he was okay just being like a role player, which is important for if we're keeping the Jays. Like, you need guys and pieces around there. Another guy I like, we're talking Irish, we're talking the Celtics. I'd mentioned Blake Wesley of Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Sort of this surprise ahead of schedule guy at 6'5". He's averaging 13 points per game, handling a lot of primary ball handling responsibilities, gets to his spots well off the bounce. You can see the confidence growing. I mean, he's got a funky sling across the body type shot. If he goes back to school, he's going to be a real breakout guy for next year's draft. So you can snake him around 18 or 20, and he's popping up on all these mock draft boards today. He had 24 points against Illinois. He started every game in the ACC. He's going to be a stud. I firmly believe that. And the last one, I have Dell Moore from Duke. He's had a huge bounce back year after a lackluster sophomore season, shooting 41% from three on nearly 4 attempts per game, and also 6 rebounds and 5 assists while initiating some offense. And he could be Duke's MVP while still understanding his role. I mean, he's playing with Paul Banchero, who's projected top 3 pick. He's playing with AJ Griffin, who's probably another projected top 20-ish guy. So when I'm looking at the Celtics, you also want guys that are going to understand what they're being drafted and what they're coming into. You're not just drafting in a vacuum necessarily for the best prospect. I mean, you definitely need depth, but part of that is still the understanding of knowing what to do when you get here in Beantown.
So Johnny Davis is flying up draft boards, is he not?
Oh, yeah. Yes,
he's not going to be there, right? Because
it's funny
I love that dude.
We were going to talk sleepers, and we might still talk sleepers here. A month ago, Johnny Davis was my sleeper. I tweeted something on like December 2nd or something around there, like, love Johnny Davis. He grew up playing on our circuit with Under Armour, so that's a kid that I've seen develop and play since he's been 15 years old. He's way better than I thought he was. I thought maybe in 3 years we'd be talking about a back-end first-round guy. But he's ridiculous. He had 37 points at Mackey Arena against Purdue. Shades of, don't hold me to this, I'm not saying Dwayne Wade, but that type of game, just a killer off the dribble, pull-ups, defends. He's a pest in the backcourt. He's athletic. He's a good teammate. I talked to somebody around that program when he had 37 points the next day, and they said he was really pissed off after the game. I said, that's so stupid, man. You guys just won like on the road. Like, why mad? Well, he missed 3 free throws, and he turned it over once. He wanted 40. I'm like, oh, I'll take that guy. So
Give me that dude.
I love Johnny Davis. He's probably in that 5 to 8-ish range, and I hope the Celtics aren't there. That would be bad for everybody.
I know, it really would be. But,
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, before we get out of here, you went out on a limb. You mentioned him earlier last draft for Bones Highland. Like, I think you were way higher on him than most everybody of the normal kind of draft guys I keep tabs on. And it looks like you were probably right, honestly. Bones looks awesome, and he's just good. He is fun as hell to watch, too.
Yeah.
Playing with Jokic. So, who's got the Bones Highland Award this draft? Who's your favorite sleeper in that first, second round? You know, end of the first, top of the second type guy.
I'm going to hedge and give you about 3 because I think one is
perfect.
Tough. Because last year I like Troy Murphy. I like Bones. I like Josh Primo, who's getting more of an opportunity now. Yeah. My guy who I don't know if he declares, but I would take him late first, early second, is Julian Strather from Gonzaga. He's never the guy out there playing with Chet Holmgren and Drew Timme, but he makes open shots. He moves well away from the ball. He finds places to cut and score around the rim, shooting close to 50% from the field, 39 from 3. If he goes back to Spokane, he'll in my view, he'll be a lock top 20 guy. I love taking him kind of in that range because, again, he's the type of guy that's playing with like 2 kind of national, I don't say player of the year, but names and entities and commodities that he doesn't care. Like, that's when he back cuts and you hit him with a bounce pass. That's when he sneaks in behind the defense and hits a little jumper. You need those type of pieces with the Celtics, what they're trying to do. If you want a creator, a guy I also like is Jordan Hall from St. Joe's. He's 6'7", multi-use offensively, where he can set screens and pick and roll and also come off screens and pick and roll, sort of like a Kyle Anderson slow-mo type of game. I think he'll be a better pro than he is right now at St. Joe's, despite his statistics of 16 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. And my last one is Julian Champagne from St. John's. He's averaging 21 points per game, 7 rebounds. He had 34 points and 16 rebounds last night against DePaul. He's shooting 44% from 3. Can be a tough defender. Definitely a rotational type of guy that could exceed his ranking too. And it's a weird draft. It's weird in that I don't love the middle of the first round to like the second, but that like 25 to 45, there's a lot of interesting names and older guys and college seniors and smaller colleges. And you may follow up and say, well, why aren't those second round guys in the first down? It's you're playing these games with upside and what a guy could be who's 19 versus 22. If there's a good thing for Celtics fans to look forward to, I don't think they want like a developmental project right now. They want guys who can step in and be okay getting minutes, and there are plenty of those guys. It just depends on kind of what your flavor is that you want to go after.
Yeah, and I mean, you can buy those picks in the top of the second round pretty cheaply, for sure. So I'd like to see us, if there's a guy we really like who's, 4-year senior, I say we go get him.
Take him. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what happens. All right. Well, thanks, Matt. That was an awesome pod, man. We are out of questions for you. Although, if you really want, that post I put up on Reddit has like 50. So, if you're really bored today, you could just go in there and respond to all of them.
I'll make up a fake pseudonym. So if it hits, I'll say that was me. If it wasn't, I'll just disown the whole thing. It wasn't me. That was I love Clutch Sports 34. That was a different guy.
That's right. But that's going to do it for this one on the Celtics Reddit podcast. Thank you again, Matt, for your time, and shout out Big Deli.
Yeah, Big Deli, Jeff Slavsky. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.